Hello, I'm Michael Peters, and this is What You Need to Know About Social Psychology Part 2. When we last left our heroes, we were talking about the dangers of stereotyping. And there are dangers, because these shortcuts that our brains make in order to process the world quickly tend to overgeneralize the information we're getting, and we make snap judgments that may not account for every example in a certain situation. And we make these snap judgments based on our past experiences. And these past experiences give us what's called prejudices. Now, prejudices by themselves aren't dangerous because everyone has them, and it's very difficult to avoid them because our past histories are also different. What's dangerous is the discrimination, and those are the behaviors. And I want to make that abundantly clear. The prejudice is the belief. The discrimination is the behavior. And the prejudice we can't avoid. The discrimination is what we need to avoid in treating people differently because of their stereotype group. And the dangers of discrimination, mostly in what's called stereotype threat. And that's where, let's say for example, I'm stereotyped in a negative way. If I internalize that, if I'm treated that way and I internalize it, I may begin to act in a way that that stereotype represents me. For example, in elementary school kids, specifically in kindergartners, the factor most correlated with how I will act as a kindergartner isn't what I think of myself. It isn't what my parents think of me. It isn't what my teacher thinks of me. It's what my peers think of me. Those other kindergartners will actually adapt my behavior to fit into their group. So it's important to understand that the group, the social group, is largely responsible, highly correlatedly responsible, to what position I'm going to have in that group. And if that group has stereotyped me in a certain way, I might end up acting in that certain way that the group wants me to act. And a lot of this comes from what's called conformity. We are very likely to actually conform to what the group wants of us. And here's a video explaining the Asch study, one of the most famous studies in conformity. The Asch study begins by enlisting 4 Confederates, which are people who are designed to help in the study. And what they do is they sit around the participant and give false answers to a question. And we see how long it takes for the participant to conform to the beliefs and behaviors of the group. And it usually does not take that long. Here's the study. Another danger of belonging to a group is called diffusion of responsibility. And diffusion of responsibility is in some ways like social loafing. Having the responsibility that you would have alone, you might not necessarily have in a group. And what usually happens is that the participant will behave in a way that's similar to the people around them. And usually that means not calling for help. For example, someone falls down on the street. If others do not help that one person, it is highly unlikely that a participant would help that person either. If someone yells, "Someone call 911," it's very unlikely that anyone actually will. And the thing I want you to take from this is that when you have an emergency and you need someone's help, it's very important that you single someone out and tell that one person to dial 911 in that emergency. Because a blanket statement asking anyone to, everyone will generally assume that someone else will do it and won't do it themselves. The exception to this case is people who have been trained to respond to emergencies. They will in effect fall back on their training and do what's necessary in that emergency. But in a situation that no one has emergency experience, it's highly likely that everyone will expect someone else to have that experience and nothing will happen. And this is called the Kitty Genovese case, wherein a woman named Kitty Genovese was on her way home from work, and she was attacked. And she cried for help, and people came to their windows, but no one actually did anything about it. She was then brutally murdered, and she tried to escape, and still no one called police. She eventually found her way to a hallway, where she was attacked again by the same person. When he ran off, then someone came to help. Social scientists were appalled by this, and did research to see if this is what would really happen in today's world. Which brings us to altruism and aggression. Altruism is designed as behavior to benefit another without any immediate reward. Aggression is defined as behavior intended to harm another person. So let's go to altruism first. Does altruism really exist? Is it possible for someone to help another person without any sense of reward? Because just helping someone means that they're going to get at least some internal satisfaction. Are they performing services so that they can get a reward or at least higher standing in society? Or even if they are performing services for the community just to feel good, is that feeling good considered a reward in among itself? So there is some question whether altruism really exists. But, in a sense, does it matter? Then a behaviorist might say only the behavior is what's important. The motivation behind it isn't. Because only the behavior can actually change the world. And then we have aggression. Behavior designed to harm another. Now, in an interesting study on cultures of honor and aggression, what researchers did was they went to South America and studied orphans who did not have direct parental contact. They effectively lived in the slums outside of a capital city in South America. And the researchers were interested in the moral development and aggressive development of those children. And it turns out those children, even without parental influence, were not specifically and intentionally aggressive towards each other for no reason. The exception to that was what was called revenge. For example, violence was not common against people who were minding their own business. In fact, it was difficult to get someone to act aggressively against someone who had done nothing wrong. However, if the subject was told that the other child had actually stolen a bike, they were actually more inclined to act aggressively against the kid they were told had stolen the bike. In fact, they were likely to suggest that the violence should be increased so that the child should not do it again.